$554 billion in 2019. This year, we are expecting that to fall by 20% to $445 billion. At that level, remittances are larger than all the money going through foreign direct investment flows going through multinational companies. At that level, remittances are more than 3 times the size of official aid going to developing countries. So it's a lifeline to poor countries and poor households. It's going to affect millions of people out there for their basic survival and basic necessities.
These are huge figures you're talking about it, but it also boils down, as you're saying, to individuals. Now, if we look at the households, you're saying this is a very stark blow for them. But what about the migrant workers themselves who work often in the informal labour market? They don't have recourse to state aid themselves, which many employees have been able to have access to. Well, what does this mean for them?
That actually is an important point that, let's say 1 billion people or several 100 million people are actually living in big cities like London, Paris, New York, and they are stranded there because of the lockdown. They have lost jobs, incomes are falling, and they are in perhaps dormitories or in particular places where social distancing is not always possible. So they're stranded, and there is that need to bring them into our government responses and include them so that they get cash transfers, some basic help, as well as housing and access to sanitation, as well as access to health services. The same applies to their families back home in countries like Ghana or Somalia, where the households are poor, they're informal, they're undocumented sometimes, undocumented migrants and their families are poor back there, and they're in the informal sector. They sometimes fall through the cracks, and they are not even in the registers of governments to be able to give them, to be able to receive cash transfers. So there is that need to be inclusive of migrants and their households, and there is a need for origin countries as well as host countries to come together to address the problems that are faced by stranded workers, to help them out and include them in our responses.
Now, you were just talking about Europe there and the many European capitals and the potential of people falling through the cracks. Now, as Europe has been put very much on a crisis footing, are these people being remembered now? Are they receiving that help they require?
They are not receiving help as we went through the first round of our responses to the crisis. So we have left out the foreign-born people and migrants in particular. And now there is a risk that a large number of them are in different cities, and they're concentrated and they're not able to move. So as they themselves, first they need help themselves. And second, if we don't help them, then we are putting ourselves at risk. So there is a need to include migrants and address their plight together, sometimes with, if needed, the help and collaboration from origin country governments. So that help ought to be for healthcare, for cash transfers. Also, money transfer companies, which are critical to be for remittances to be channeled. Money transfer businesses are not considered essential services, and they are shut down. So even if people had money, they are not able to send money home. And yet that money is a lifeline to perhaps 1 billion people, perhaps a couple of billion people out there. So recognizing money service businesses as essential could help a little bit. And finally, all of us are using online channels to send money. But to be able to do that, one needs to be in the banking sector, to have a bank account at both ends, sending end as well as the receiving end for remittances. And governments need to bring more people into the banking channel or relax some of the regulations that keep people away from banking channels. Those are some of the key policy responses that have to be